Recover, perform, excel. What do those words really mean in a world where injury, recovery and performance are forever evolving? It's time to find out with a performance and rehabilitation podcast from Kikko Health. Okay, I'd like to welcome Kevin Mulholland to the podcast today. Kevin is the Head of Performance and Sports Science at Wrexham AFC, previously working with other elite clubs such as Stoke City, Sheffield Wednesday, Southampton, and the Republic of Ireland. So, Kev, welcome to the podcast. How are things going there?
Hi, John. Thanks very much. Yeah, listen, everything's been brilliant. It's been busy since promotion to the Championship and something that we're really looking forward to. So, yeah, all good here, and thanks very much for having me on today.
Not a problem at all. So, the focus of our discussion really today, or the topic of the podcast, is to looking into objective data and how we manage things going forward as practitioners in elite sport. But before that, Kev, obviously I've given a little bit of an insight into your background there. Do you want to go through a little bit of your journey of, I guess, how you've ended up in the role that you're currently in, and how things have sort of developed since you've arrived at Wrexham?
I'll start from the bottom, really. Studied sports science back home in Ireland. Tried to make it as a professional golfer, but just wasn't good enough. Came back to the UK and studied physio. Worked in the NHS as a band 5 physio, and during that period of time really felt that football was going to be what I wanted to go in and the career I wanted to follow. So started off working at Stoke City Football Club as physio, covering under 9s to 16s games on a Sunday, and that soon progressed into under 18s, head of academy, head of a Cat 1 club, and working in with the first team there. From there, progressed to Sheffield Wednesday as a senior physio at Sheffield Wednesday, and then on to Southampton in the Premier League as head of performance physio. I guess during that period of time, I was working with the Republic of Ireland as well, from the first team to the under 21s, and then back to the senior team as head physio again. So it's been a great experience from when I started in football to where I am now as head of performance at Wrexham AFC. I think the last 4 years at Wrexham have been very different to anything I've experienced in football before. We speak about how every day is different in football, but I think at this football club, everything is different each day, but you've got an added layer on top of it with cameras around and the hype that is around the club. And from a commercial and performance point of view, there's been a lot of focus and attention on the club, but it's an absolute great club to be at, and a club that's trying to do things the right way to work our way up the football pyramid, as we have from the National League to Championship, and ready for a tough battle ahead.
Before we get into sort of a bit more in detail of what things, and the changes that you're going through at the moment and your development of your department there, just sort of give a bit of an insight into the difference. Obviously, you've worked at international level, you've worked at club level. I guess when it comes to sort of monitoring our athletes and monitoring our players, what are the key differences in working those two different environments? Because it must be quite different.
Yeah, I think before we probably start in terms of that, you alleviate it to working in the Premier League and working at international level. You've got everything at your disposal. You've got staff at your disposal, you've got equipment, and you've got facilities. Now, coming to Wrexham 4 years ago, to a team that was in the National League for 14, 15 years, poor facilities, no staffing structure, that's taken a long time to progress that to where we are today. And if I look at the facilities we have now and the staff that we have now compared to sort of 4 years ago is significantly better, significantly stronger, and is a probably a great benefit to the players that are coming in now. In terms of your question, as I said, international, Premier League, you have everything that you require. I think coming in 4 years ago to National League level, it's about what are the key things that we can do and what we can implement with what we have, with the staff that we have and the facilities that we have. And I think as you progress through the leagues and the funding becomes a little bit better and your staff numbers start to increase, then you can start rolling out the diagnostic factors, the screening, the test, and the sort of principles and protocols that we would have at Premier League and international level. So I think at the club, we're working towards putting Premier League standard care in place everyone understands that that takes time, and it's not something that can happen overnight in terms of our processes or policies, and just making sure that everything correct is in place for the players to give them the best opportunity to perform in training on a daily basis. But most important, when they cross that white line on a Tuesday night or a Saturday night or whenever the game would be, that they can play at their optimal peak performance to help us secure the points in a game.
Yeah, and I think people might find that difficult to sort of comprehend at times. I know the perception in the outside world sometimes about football, having sort of been in it for a little while myself, is you've got everything that you need. But obviously, like you said there, the decision for you to go to Wrexham and the journey that you've been on, personally as well as a club over time, that things don't happen that quickly. They take time, they take planning. How difficult has that actually been, along the way? Because you've been there and seen that international level. You've been there, Premier League and Championship levels, and then to go into that environment where you maybe don't have the things that you need. How difficult has that been for you as a practitioner, really, over time?
Yeah, I think back to my first day when I arrived. I think there was a physio bed and a physio bag available at the club. So we've gone on to develop that significantly to where we got quite a large backroom team of myself, 2 physios, 2 S&C, 2 sports therapists. We've got a full-time nutritionist. We're advertising for a full-time club doctor. We've got consultants in podiatry and chiropractor. So we've put in place what we officially had at a Premier League team. I think you look back and you look at the screening and the testing and the diagnostics that we done in year one were extremely limited. But as I sort of mentioned, the testing that we done to the best of the ability with the facilities and the equipment that we had available. I think people soon realised that with the ownership that the club were going to progress quite quickly. And all of a sudden you get inundated with all sorts of equipment being thrown at you and saying, oh, we can support you with this, we can support you with that. So I think what I done and what I feel that we as a department done really well was that we just didn't say, yeah, we'll have that, we'll take this piece of equipment and we'll take it in and we'll use it. We were very selective with what screening processes we would do, what diagnostic equipment we would bring in, because what we didn't want to do, and as a department, we didn't just want to collect data for the sake of collecting data and being like, oh, look, we've collected this, we've collected that. And then the data pile just sits in the corner and nothing's done with it from pre-season until the following pre-season when you repeat the test. So I feel for me as department lead, I wanted to make sure that anything that we brought in that we done our due diligence on, that it was good quality, that it would fit in with what we were doing as a club, but more importantly, it would benefit the department in a number of ways. It would allow us to identify player asymmetries. It would allow us to identify previous players' injuries that we might not pick up in a medical screen. And it would aid our gym sessions to make the players stronger, quicker, and able to perform better. So everything that we've brought in and everything that we're implementing is designed and taken on board to help the players. We're not just going to take a piece of equipment that someone says, oh, this will do this. We need to do our research on it and make sure it actually helps us. And you've been in our gym and you look around, it's got everything that we need, a professional football club needs, to allow our players to do that and allow us to test them and improve them on a daily and weekly basis.
Yeah, look, like you say, I've been fortunate enough to come over and spend an afternoon with you guys and look around the facility. Look at what you've developed there, and it's like I say, it's outstanding. It's something that's obviously evolved quickly over time, and you've adapted to the needs of the people around you really quickly, and got what you feel is the right bits of equipment in, despite given there's obviously a background story with Wrexham at the moment, but given that's sort of probably brought even more challenges, I would imagine. What can we sort of have? What can we get to the opposite end where people are sort of falling over themselves trying to give you certain things? But that's a great insight into you as a professional to assess those things individually. Figure out whether you need those or don't need those things, whether they'll add value or not add value. And that's a great credit to yourself, and obviously your development over time, and we're all moving forward of how you've managed to manage the environment as much as managing the difficulty of working in elite sport day in, day out, which is demanding enough on its own. And I guess with that, we talk about your change and development, and you talk about the difference in staff and the numbers of staff. How do you feel that sort of change and develop you over time as probably more, not just a practitioner, but as a leader?
Obviously, previously working in a lot of elite sport and on an international level. So again, you have the staff, you have the facilities, you have the infrastructure built behind you. Coming into Wrexham, to the football club, though, that infrastructure didn't exist. There was no staff in place. There was no player care. We were a real sort of basic skeleton crew. I think when I came in, it was myself. We had one S&C, we had one soft tissue therapist who was part-time, one kitman, and the coaching staff. I think that was it. So you look around now and we got a sports performance medical team with 14, 16 staff in it. We've got a new player care department. We got obviously our new CEO and all his team that has come in recently. The team and commercial, everything's just expanding rapidly. The club obviously on the pitch went really quickly up the leagues, and I think now we're starting to realise and catch up off the field, which is really, really important, that we can support the players and the staff. But from a personal level, it was something that really excited me, and probably part of the reason why I joined the club. Working at previous clubs, I was a physio. I was a lead performance physio. I was head physio with the Irish national team. So I had experience of managing a handful of staff that might fall underneath me. But this was a whole new battle and a whole new sort of experience and journey for me, which is what really, really excited me.
There obviously must have been some driver and some stimulus, and you and I have spoken before. Do you want to sort of share how you made that leap of faith, if you like? Who, if you're happy mentioning names of people that you've sort of entrusted and had respect for, that, explained the project that was going to happen? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously your move came before, a lot of the changes to Wrexham occurred. So
yeah, so I think it was 2021, I think the current owners had bought a club the previous March and finished that season in the playoffs and were successful in gaining promotion. And it was through a very good sort of, I consider him a friend, Les Reed, who was previously at Southampton, got in touch with me and explained the situation. I'm not going to lie, when he rang me first and he said, "Kevin, we'd like you to come to Wrexham, would you be interested?" My initial thoughts was absolutely not. Why would I leave a Premier League club with top class facilities to go to a team in Wrexham who didn't have a training ground, who'd been in the National League for a long period of time? And it wasn't until I spoke to Les and Mo, who previously worked at Southampton as well, and this sort of stole the story to me in terms of what their vision was for the club, what the owner's vision was for the club, and how they were going to get there. So that sort of got my interest a little bit, and I was like, maybe this is something that I can do, because in football, as a practitioner, as a physio, you get to a level where not that you're comfortable, but you want to keep pushing, but sometimes there's just that ceiling in place, at club infrastructure in place with you. And for me to progress to the next level, it was either move from my current job into a head physio role at another club. And I didn't feel at that time that I didn't have enough experience, didn't have enough sort of leadership skills about me to go into a championship team or a Premier League team as a head of performance or anything like that. So this sold me the dream of Wrexham and the possibility of coming to the football club as head of performance. And I think the big thing that sold it for me was when I spoke to the manager and his coaching staff, Phil Parkinson and his coaching staff. He explained to me how he had sort of similar thoughts about joining Wrexham, obviously from managing in the Championship and League One his whole career to National League. And he sort of again identified what players we were going to be looking at to sign, the style of play that he wanted to go, how he wanted training to look like, and what he was here for. And then you speak to Les again, and the opportunity to come to a club with no medical team in place. And the important thing for me was, and the thing that probably sold it to me, was the ability to build a sports medical team and a sports science team with creating values and creating a culture where we could implement it and grow it, rather than going into a club and having to fit in with their culture and their values. So the opportunity to bring on board all these staff, which we have done, and to train them and get them to create our club culture and our club values, rather than, as I said, walking into something that exists and fitting into it. Wrexham gives us the ability to mold and shape the department how we want to build it. And before we recruit in the department, I won't go and decide and say, oh, we need a new sports scientist, we need a new physio. I like to be quite open and honest, and we'll have a conversation in the department, and we'll review our processes quarterly, and we're like, what have we done well? Where could we have done better? What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? How can we improve? But we don't just look at what went wrong, we look at what we do well as well, because that sort of credit and sort of well done and tap on the back is really important in the department to keep everyone motivated and focused, because you can be in so many clubs from experience where the clubs only focus on this wasn't right, this went wrong, how can we improve it? So for me, the feeling of belonging within the club, responsibility, and giving staff and everyone in the department the responsibility. I don't want to micromanage staff. I trust the staff that we brought in. They live the culture, they breed the culture that we're creating. And I think that when people feel valued in the club and they show that their work is rewarded, then you get that little bit extra from your staff. And that's what I want my staff to feel. I want them to feel valued, empowered, and listened to, more importantly, because I look back at my career and I try and take the best things that I learned at each club, because listen, I worked with some great practitioners and I developed massively throughout my time at all my previous clubs. And I always think and try and reflect on my practices and my times at previous clubs, and this leader was really good at that. I like that. I'm going to bring that with me. But at the same time, reflect on when I was being line managed by senior staff, what I didn't like and how I felt in each situation, because it's quite easy as a leader to keep pushing. But at the same time, you got to remember, well, a few years ago, I was in that position and this is how I felt. So for me, communication and listening to your staff is the biggest thing. And if you can communicate effectively with a team, and more importantly, you can listen to how your team are feeling and their views and respect them, I think then you can work far better as a team together and get success.
No, I think you bring some great points, and we've both worked in different environments, and like you say, along the way, you see other people and you think, yeah, I want to take that bit with me, and I want to take this. And I remember, going into departments and going, look, I've been there where things have always been focused on when things go wrong, and not often enough is it focused upon the things when things go right and what goes well. And, we've done well to get a player back in a certain time, or, the player's gone on and had success and not had issues going forward, or we think we've caught things before they might develop into something more serious. And that not often gets brought up. And that leadership aspect of giving individuals purpose, giving them buy-in, giving them a belief in a common goal is a way to get, great success out of a team in a department. And, like I say, I've been with you over there. I've seen it. We took a photograph with one of your bits of equipment with 15 to 20 people in the photograph who were all pulling in the same direction and desperate to learn and desperate to look at new ways of doing things and move forward. And it was great to see that in a department that's rapidly changed over time. If you go back to 4 years ago, it's a totally different animal in the sense of the size of department and managing those people. So like I said before, it's a sort of a credit to what you've managed to achieve in such a short space of time.
The other thing, John, on that is that it's not just a focus on the first team or emphasis on first team. As you say, you go back to when you join us with the Biodex and you came and done our training and installed the unit, you will have seen that them staff, there were wide range in skill sets. So it was first team, it was academy, it was women. So not just leading the first team department, it's about leading the club and making sure that everybody across the club, that their skill set is equal, so that if there's opportunity to move within the club, then that opportunity exists as well. Because again, looking back at previous clubs, and you'll know yourself in some previous clubs where there's a clear distinction between first team staff, academy staff and women's staff. And you might not see them, you might not interact with them, but our department, I want that sort of interchangeability between everybody. I'll go some days and spend days with the academy. We'll invite our academy staff up to shadow us in the first team. We'll take our women's staff in. And again, I just feel that empowers everybody and gives everyone a wider skill set. And I think from looking back when I was in an academy, I sort of felt quite isolated, and that's not what I want our staff to feel. I want them to all feel that they're valued, empowered, and part of the big team, which we're building. And I think if we can do that, then we'll be successful moving forward.
Yeah, and like you say, across the board, not just the men's first team. Like you say, building that club ethos and that togetherness of the department as a whole, from a medical and sports science aspect, can only help and benefit the club. And obviously, it's Wrexham are fortunate in that sense to have someone that's of that mindset and delivering such a high level of care across the entire club, not just focused on one part, which is rare, which isn't common, and people out there need to realise that and acknowledge that too. So I guess moving into, we may have already discussed it to a degree, is like the next question, or the next sort of phase of this conversation, goes into the challenges that in life. Guess your biggest challenge right now, I appreciate that the move and the development of the department has been a challenge over time, but I guess, currently then, as we stand and where we are at the stage now, what are the most challenging things that you're having to sort of go through at the moment?
Where do you want me to start?
Because look, life's not always been easy. Look, and we don't need to talk about these things here, but there's obviously difficult challenges in life away from sport that we all have, and some things are more serious than others at times. But obviously, the challenges and the demands that go with your current role, probably you could argue, have that slightly higher level of public interest, given things that have happened in your work environment.
Yeah, I think everyone realizes that it's going to be a big step up from League One to the Championship in terms of the demands that the players are under, both physically, mentally, tactically, whatever aspect you look at it. The demands are higher for each level that you progress up, and that's on the pitch. But at the same time, the demands on staff grow as well, in terms of the quality of players that we're probably looking to bring in, the treatment that they will require, and just the standards that they're used to in Premier League teams and Championship teams. And it's about us as a staff really combining together and making sure that we got the right skill sets in place, making sure we right CPD pathways in place for the staff, and that they can learn and develop. What we don't want is, we don't want staff feeling that they're a little bit sort of unsure what players are going to want, what they can do. We have a very open and honest and clear communication pathway that, listen, if you have an issue or you got a concern, let's speak about it openly, honest. Someone else might be better placed and better skilled to deal with that player. A bit like when you pick up an injury, part and parcel of football, I always say to everyone, is contact injuries. Someone might be a specialist in the knee area, someone might be a specialist in the groin area. But as a team, we need to identify that and make sure that the player's getting the best care. In terms of major challenges, is time, isn't it? Time to, where do you fit this in the day? And again, something that as a leader I really focused on. And a lot of people talk about work-life balance. And it's a hot topic on social media. You scroll through Twitter, you look on Instagram, and everyone's like, top level practitioners, I'm leaving football because I want to spend time with my family. I'm away too much. And I think previously, I was on the work-life balance. I was like, work-life balance is this. This is what it means to me. This is what it means to my staff. And it's probably not until I started managing staff when I sat back and I took a real sort of, right, let me delve into this and let me have a think about it and let me see what it means to me. So work-life, well, why should it be work-life? Like, we're all got individuals. You've got family. I've got family. The players have got family. I don't think the emphasis should be on work life. I think it should be, and what I tell my staff is, for me, life comes first and then work, because I think, and I want my staff to enjoy their life. I want them to have time with their family. I want to have them having time off. And if they're happy at home and happy in their home lives and things are steady and calm, then when them individuals and my team members come into work, they're fully focused on their job. I'd rather have my staff coming in 5 days a week and being really focused 100% of the time and working on their tasks that they're doing than working 7 days a week and coming in at 50, 60% of their capacity. Because I've seen it before where staff are in 7 days a week for 2, 3, 4 weeks and I've seen and experienced mistakes being made. But if we can build a department here with what we're trying to build at Wrexham, where staff have their days off during the week, if they've got a family wedding, they can go to a family wedding. If they want to have a week off in season, have a week off in season. As long as we've got the staff and the infrastructure to support that, which is what we're trying to achieve, that's far more beneficial. And all of a sudden, staff feel, oh, well, I don't feel guilty asking for a weekend off because Kevin doesn't mind if I'm not at a game, or I don't mind asking for Tuesday off. That's what we're trying to build. And for me, I'm going on, right, let's get life balance in life work rather than work-life balance. And listen, I had great conversations with an individual over this, and I've got no problem saying his name on the podcast, and that's David Ford, who used to be goalkeeper for Republic of Ireland and a coach for the Republic of Ireland. And we had a very detailed conversation that started off as a 10-minute chat when we were away in Portugal, which ended up being a 4-hour discussion around this. And it's just that little bit of a golden nugget that I've brought with me. And I'm like, okay, well, I want my staff to enjoy working in football, but I don't want them to be tired. I don't want to put a detriment to their family or their outside life. I want you to have your family, have your hobbies, but when you come in that front door across the line at Wrexham, you're fully focused on what we're doing. And I think you can achieve that best by having that life-work balance with the staff.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the difficult things, if I look back over my career, and I've lost good friends from basically putting work first. And look, would I go back and change things necessarily in that moment? Maybe not, but I think the world's changed. I think people have changed. I think the focus has changed a little bit in that sense. And maybe I wouldn't have achieved some of the things that I achieved if I'd have taken a different approach. But I just think, like you say, if you can get an environment where people come to work and they're happy, they'll do anything for you. They'll run through a wall for you, and if you can say, if you've got a wedding at the weekend, don't worry about it. Go and do it. We've got enough bodies because we're all working together. We can jump in and cover each other. I think that creates a fantastic, work environment. And look, that is sort of a big challenge as a leader of a department to manage that and get that and have the support from above potentially to go, well, where's he today? Why are they not here? Because, we get asked that by managers, don't they? Oh, are they part-time? Don't they fancy it today? And that, we laugh, but it's true, isn't it? We've got a big game, is it what's more important to them? Okay then, Kevin, we spoke about, obviously, the developments of your processes and protocols for sort of test data, looking at pre-season, assessments and what equipment was available to you and how that's changed over time, really. So do you want to give us a little insight into what might sort of come into use during your pre-season testing for your players now in comparison to days gone by, now that you've got a bit more equipment to play with?
Yeah, sure. Listen, I think with pre-season screening, John, the thing that we look at from our end is, and we mentioned it earlier in the podcast, is that what we collect, it needs to be valuable to us. It needs to be valuable to us as a department from a physical point of view, but also from a performance type of view. And as I said, I've watched and been at a lot of clubs and seen a lot of practitioners just do test after test after test, spend days and hours looking at data, storing data, and then never actually having any meaningful impact with the information to collect. So we sit down at the end of every season and discuss during the season about a pre-season screening, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, but more importantly, why we're going to do it. And then secondly, what we're going to do with the data when we have it. So we'll have a lot of data still that we will collect. We'll collect from a physical data point, and that will start with a physio screen. We'll look at players, how to move, just a basic physical assessment of them because we haven't seen them in 6-7 weeks at this stage.
And what kind of thing does that entail for those that don't sort of fully understand that world? What kind of things would you look at in that sort of movement assessment or reassessing how the guys are?
So we base a lot on the movement and performance matrix, and we've created our own sort of movement screen, a little bit like what FMS is and different screening protocols that different clubs may use. And we've got sort of 7-8 key functional movement tests that we will look at players. And them tests will be low threshold tests and combined with high threshold tests. And what we try and do is we try and make them meaningful to football. So yes, we look at the normal step, squat, lunge pattern, which will give us a basic description and understanding of how the player moves. But the players, in our opinion and from our team discussions, don't do them movements on the pitch in isolation. Yes, they're great to identify how a player moves and the capability of a player, but they don't squat in a pitch double leg with the hands above their heads. So we sort of try and build them movements into a functional movement that they will play in a game. So we'll have a look at them going from a lunge position into a sideways movement. We'll have a look at them going from a sort of multi-directional lunge into a kicking action. We'll look at them landing and change the direction, and we record all that data and we can look on it. But we can look at certain things on that data. We can look at how to land on their foot, where to land on their foot, how their ankle sort of moves over their knee, their hip, their pelvis, upper trunk. So we can start to build a picture using certain data points on that individual as to, right, okay, this movement might not be ideal for the player, but that's how they move. Now, I've worked with a lot of people who do this type of stuff and are real experts at it, and they'll see something that they don't like and try and change it. Now, you have to look at that from both ways. That's the way the player potentially move for their full life. It depends on what type of player you're looking at. If they're an 18, 19-year-old or a 35, 36-year-old, are you going to change someone at 35 and 36 and really make a change on how to move? Maybe not. Can you make it slightly better? Yes, you can. With a younger player, you've got that window of opportunity to maybe take them in the gym and use this data and build it up over weeks, months, years, so that when you do retest quarterly or half season or at the end of the season, that you can see a meaningful impact in what you're trying to achieve. So it might be you're looking at this player and you're looking at how their pelvis and trunk change when they're trying to change direction. Maybe it's moving in the wrong direction. So you can sit down, show it to the player, explain what you're trying to change. And then you can look at this maybe in the 505 test and explain to them. So you're looking at a test, but you're putting it into practice as well. So you can work on them things in the gym, retest them, show them the changes, but then repeat the test on pitch and hopefully you're seeing the results from the gym into practice.
Yeah, that reminds me of a situation. If I go back on earlier in my career as well, with I guess one of your fellow countrymen actually, going back a few years, a left winger who was obviously positional wise, he did things so he could turn one way without anyone realizing he'd already changed direction, but turning the other way, it was obvious that the turning circle was significantly larger than one way. And then the conversations about making these things bespoke, it's not like we're there to go, oh, we've spotted this is different, we're going to try and change this. The fact that he could turn round in one direction so quickly is what made him an exceptional player that went on with an amazing career and now into management. You know, that's how he got his success. If we changed that, did we actually take away some of the things that made them an outstanding individual, or were we going to help them? You don't know, do you? But sometimes as a clinician, as an expert in our fields, if you like, you go, I've got to make a call here of what we think is the most important thing, but it's got to be relevant to that individual, and it's got to be not just a case of, well, we found this, so we treat everyone in this way when we find that.
Yeah, I think you probably hit the nail on the head with that, and it was something that I was going to come on to in our screening process, is that we treat every single player at the club as an individual. So we don't screen the player and then say, right, list 4 or 5 key findings and then say, right, off you go, here's your gym program, which is the same as the other 20 outfield players.
But you do see that, don't you? You see that.
You see it so often, and
at the highest level even.
Yeah, like for me, I look back last year, the needs of Stephen Fletcher, one of the older strikers in the league, compared to Mo Fall, who is one of our younger strikers. They're both different individuals. They both got different characteristics. They got both different strengths, different weaknesses. Now, I can't justify giving both of them players, oh yeah, here you go, here's a lower body program, here's an upper body program, off you go and do the same thing. they don't need the same things. Some of them need velocity-based training. Some of them need power. Some of them need strength. Some of them need movement control. And that's something that we really focused on at Wrexham and at the club, is that no two players are the same. They've all got their own individual programs. We go through it in fine detail with them, give them ownership of the program as well, because the responsibility is on them to keep that up, and we'll stay on top of them to make sure they're doing it. But a big thing on the screening and the performance to make these players better is that everything is unique and individual to them, because if you just blanket the squad, you're not going to get improvements. You might get 3 or 4 players might get stronger or might get a little bit quicker, but if you target them as exactly what they need, then when you retest them, you'll see that what you want people moving towards that green direction as a squad, not just as 1 or 2 individuals. So that's really, really important for us in our screening processes.
And you've talked about really trying to quantify what is a qualitative process, really, in the sense of an assessment tool, and visually looking at how people move. With regards to sort of that quantitative aspect and that objective data from some of the other objective markers you might do, what sort of other testing bits are you doing other than looking at sort of them from a movement capacity? What are the tests are you incorporating there? What have you found useful?
It's a really good question. I could talk to you about this all day, about what we do and how we do it. We're very much keen on the movement side of it, but also very, very keen on the strength side and the quantitative side of it as well. I know a lot of clubs might focus just on movement side, and then there's other teams might just focus on strength, but we really do try and combine both of them to give the players the best possible chance to increase their performance. In terms of quantitative data, we collect a significant amount. So again, like most teams, we've all our VAL equipment, our no board, force frame. We have the force decks, biodecks that we use for pre-season screening as well. And then we've got all our pitch quantitative data in speed gates, counter movement jumps, single leg jumps. In terms of quantitative data, we've got everything that everybody has. And it's about, for me, it's not just overall looking at what a player can achieve or what numbers they can achieve. It's about marrying that data together with the movement data, the strength data, the quantitative data, and putting it again. And I always go back to it, and I always will go back to it. It's about that individual. Just because a player can jump so high in the counter movement jump, that's fine. But how did it move? How did it achieve it? And again, it's that individual aspect of it that it's key to that player.
Yeah, and you've touched on that, and you've touched on it through the sort of the theme through this podcast, really, of going, look, it's about the person, it's about the human being. It's not just about the numbers. It's about how that fits with, where they've been before, what they've done. You've talked about older players and younger players. They will have had a different path to get there, and let's be honest, we've seen them, particularly in my days in rugby league, you see the damage the toll it takes over time of these players. But yeah, it's interesting, like I say, how you bring that together, and we might view that as the norm, but we can probably guarantee that, to some of the people listening, that's not necessarily the norm everywhere. And marrying those two sides up is probably not as common as the world might think.
Again, at the club, and you will have experienced it at other clubs that you're at, and you probably sit here and could name 5 or 6 or as many clubs as you want where physio is seen as a medical discipline, and S&C is seen as strength and conditioning, and the communication and the discussion between that doesn't really exist or is not married up. But here at Wrexham, we share the same office. We're in all the meetings together, and it's important that physios, S&C, sports therapists, rehab therapists, that we all work together, and that everybody knows exactly where we are with the players. So we'll do our screening from a physio point of view. We'll have our S&C do their screening. We'll have our physical coaches do their screening. And another thing that we really work on, we try and sort of promote is to involve the coaches at this stage, because we can see from a physical point of view and a strength point of view and a movement point of view what these players can't do. But I want to understand, right, from a coaching point of view, what do you think the player can't do? Where would you like to see this player get better? Because they might have a different view on the player. We might say, well, the player can sprint at this speed and he's fast, but the coach might say, well, okay, but with the ball he doesn't achieve that, or he doesn't win enough headers for being 6'2", and then we can start marrying up their counter movement jump, their single leg movement jump, their bio decks, quad strength, hamstring ratio, is there a reason why they can't jump? Is there a reason why they can't achieve what the coach wants to do? And then that allows us to create an individual player performance plan that, as a club, we're working on a whole, so that the coaching staff and football side are married in with the medical staff, and that creates a unity within the football club, that everybody is focused on this player. And I think most importantly, that makes the player feel even valued and respect what we're trying to do.
And they can see the purpose of it, because all they want to do when they're in the gym, whether that's doing rehab, whether that's doing S&C, whatever that might be that they're doing, they want to know how they're going to perform better on the pitch.
That's a real thing that we push. Again, so many clubs have been at previously, right, you have to do gym, you have to do lower body, you have to do movement session. And the players are like, oh, I don't need to do this. But I think if you can sit down and explain to the players, listen, have a look at this clip on your system as to a movement that the coach has identified, because as soon as they hear the coach wants you to do this better, or the manager wants you to do this better, this is what we're going to put in place to help you do that better. And then we're going to look at it in 4-6 weeks. If the player can see that improvement, and then all it takes is a simple comment from the manager saying, that was great, that's exactly what I want, then we have that buy-in from the players. But again, it's letting the players have the ownership of what they're doing, identifying why they need to do it, understanding why they need to do it. And then I think what we really need to understand as medical practitioners is that we're there to help the players achieve that. And we can guide them and help them, but really make them feel valued and in charge of their own destiny.
Okay, Kevin. So part of this podcast then moving forward is we ask guests to set a question for the next guest. So the questions come for you, and again, it's new to me, and obviously very new to you. So thinking on your feet here with this one is, in a world that sort of becomes so dependent on data and so dependent on technology, how would you survive in a world if everything got taken away tomorrow? How would your practice adapt to that world?
Oh, what a great question. You're going to tell me who that came from?
Maybe after the podcast, and then you can get your revenge at that point.
That's an absolute great question. And listen, I would discuss that for weeks on end. I really, really love that question. So for me, if it was taken away, would I survive? Absolutely, yes. I'm probably old school when it comes to this, John. I'm very much, and it's something I look at, especially in academies and young players. I just feel that I'm so passionate about this, is that data actually can hinder players' progress. I often have debates with my staff. It's like, right, we look at acute chronic workloads on GPS, and we've got a 17-year-old and we've got an 18-year-old, and this is their threshold in total distance, high speed sprint distance, because if they do more than this, they're going to get injured. Where's that's science based, but where's the art of setting for players? So
I couldn't agree more. This is perfect.
How do you know that an 18-year-old can only do, say, 1,200 meters of high-speed run? How do you know? Are we restricting that player's progress? Are we stopping them from going on to achieve what they could do in the game in terms of how much they can sprint in the game, how much high speed they can do in a game? Like, yes, we've got to be careful, and I think that comes down to periodization of sessions from a Monday to a Tuesday, intensive to extensive. But should we really set limitations on players as to why they can do this, why they can do that? I can think of one senior professional that we have here, and he's like, he'll look at the data, he'll be like, okay, that's fine, but I feel good, I'm going to do more high speed running, I'm going to do more sprint distance, I'm going to do more finishing. And it's something that I think if you're not careful in a club environment, you get too focused on data.
Do you think we undertrain some people then?
100%. Yes, 100%. I really think that some players can do a lot more than we're actually doing with them. Coming back, I'll come back to that, because that's a good point. Don't let me
I keep calling up more questions.
Let me lose my train of thought where I was on it. What I was saying is that I've worked with some practitioners who is like, oh, this session's gone 12 seconds over. This small-sided game's 20 seconds over. It needs to stop. It's like, okay, I understand that you agree it might be 3-4 minute small-sided games, but the ball's been out of play for a minute, someone's been injured. So you got to get the art and understanding, and I guess that comes down to communication with the manager and trusting the manager that the session's not going to run over by half an hour, 40 minutes. We understand that. But is 4 or 5 minutes the end of the world? is an extra couple of 100 yards total distance, an extra 20 yards sprint distance going to break a player? I don't think so. Is the gym and what players can really sort of lift, really jump? I've worked with players who an encounter movement jump was terrible, but put him on a football pitch and a ball comes into the box, he'll win every header that comes in. Is that application from the gym transferable to the pitch? For some players, yes. For everybody, no. And again, it goes back to, everything seems to go back to two things, John, for me. It's about the individual and the player, and it's about the communication. And if you can get them two things right, then you can achieve. But I think that's just too much reliance on data these days, that everyone's like, oh, it has to be this, it has to be that. This paper says this paper says that. But you've got to deal with and work with the players that are in front of you. This piece of paper saying, do this amount of high-speed running if you do it this often, you prevent injuries if you do it out. That doesn't take into consideration your player demographics. It doesn't take into consideration your facilities. It doesn't take into consideration your playing schedule, your training schedule, your training intensity, your days off, your gym program, and your profiling of players. A piece of paper can say do it, but it doesn't take all them characteristics. And the piece of paper and piece of research is brilliant because it's done to that group and cohort of players. But you can't apply one single paper or one cohort to every team in the Football League because it doesn't work. And that reliance on data it's really important data, but it's not the be end and end all. So if you come in tomorrow and said, Kevin, I'm taking away your GPS, I'm taking away all your gym equipment, would I be disappointed? Yes, to a certain extent. Would I still be able to go and put sessions for the players through my experience and knowing what drills get what in terms of rehab? Yes, because I often make an emphasis on, and it's something we discuss as staff, and I do it sort of once every month, is right, what's your goal in this rehab session? What do you want to achieve? And they'll tell me, I want to do 4.5k, I want 800 meters of high speed running, I want 200 meters of sprint distance, and I want the player to get 90% of their speed. Great, go and do it. Oh, I need the iPad. No, I want you to go and do the session and just see, using your skill, your knowledge, your experience, can you hit them metrics? I'll keep the iPad and I'll observe and I'll look and I'll see. And if you're going way over it, we'll have a discussion. But I want you to go and do a session without having this data and using your skills. Go off feel, go off the player's feedback, and go off the drills and skills that you've picked up in your career. So I think things can be achieved without data, and it should be there to help. Should it be taken away completely? No. Should it be used as a marker? Yeah. Should it be the be all and end all of everything we do? In my view, no.
It won't surprise you to know that question came from someone similar to myself that started before the world of GPS, if you like, in elite sport. So, I've been there when we've kind of had nothing. And what I've noticed over time is, because of the data and because of the influx of all this information, which is great, by the way, I'm not saying that we don't want that information, but I think it's come at the cost of a feel. The feel of the clinician or the feel of the practitioner, like you mentioned there. I used to go out and do sessions, that you'd write down, you'd write your distances, you think it's going to be this much. You get a feel of what that looks like and how that feels for the player, which has gone a little bit now, where I've had staff, they've gone, well, what's he doing now in his session? Oh, he's just getting another couple of laps of the pitch because we've not quite hit our total distance. And I'm like, that's totally pointless. What, like you've just mentioned there, what's the purpose of what you're doing? I think it's fantastic that you're doing that with the staff, because that's going to develop their feel as well as their ability as modern practitioners to know the ins and outs of data, which, look, that's not going anywhere. That's with us for life.
Like, it's really important, because we could set a session, John, a rehab session or a performance session, whichever you want. And we could say, right, this session's got to be 6k. I want 1200 meters of high speed running, 300 meters of sprint distance, so many accels, so many decels. I could give that to you and I could do it. And I could say, right, John, I want you to achieve that in a 40-minute session. Kevin, I want you to achieve that in a 70-minute session. Them sessions are completely different, but if I give you the report and you only look at the key metrics that we discussed, it's all about the intensity, how it's delivered, the practicality of the session. I can go out and achieve them numbers in half an hour if I want, doing a real intensive session, or I can go out and achieve them in an extensive session. So it's about knowing what you want to achieve on that day, how you're going to achieve it, but then using data as a measurement tool and as a technique to make sure you do it. But again, I agree with you. The days of like going out and just doing it because you knew what you've done before we had all these pieces of equipment. As I said to you, I think there's an over-reliance on people these days to say, right, it needs to be this, and they need 2 laps because they've not reached the distance and the threshold. I think if the sessions are planned appropriately and you use your experience and you have that knowledge, you'll get that without having to rely too heavily on the technology side of it. But at the same time, there is some great things in the technology that are really, really helpful. So again, it's about marrying that art and science together, isn't it?
So I guess, look, to finish us off, I couldn't agree more with that. And that might have already kind of given us our takeaway message, but we'd like to finish the podcast with sort of a takeaway from the guest of a bit of advice for practitioners, maybe one thing they should be doing more of, or maybe focus on a little bit less on, and I know we've touched on these things on the way, but have you got a couple of closing comments for the listeners there, Kevin?
I think for me, the biggest thing that I've developed as a leader is communication skills. Everyone says that you can be a great physio, you can be a great mentor, but if you're not able to communicate and listen to your players, communicate and listen to your staff, then you're going to face barriers straight away. I think if you can build that relationship with the coaching staff, build a relationship with your players and really listen to them, value them, empower them, then you get everybody sort of going to one direction. And I guess the way I look at Wrexham is then it's limitless to what you can achieve. So that's my biggest thing as a leader is communicating and listening to everybody. In terms of a practical side, I think don't become too reliant on data. Don't be afraid to go out and learn new things, and don't be afraid to make mistakes and listen to other people. Do I make mistakes? Yeah. Do I speak to other people? Yeah. Do I have a mentor? Yes, I do have a mentor because I'm not perfect and I'm going to continue to develop and grow as a practitioner and a leader. So I guess don't be afraid to open up to people and listen to their opinions and ask for feedback and constructive feedback, but be prepared to take that constructive feedback as a positive and really turn something that maybe is a weak area for you into one of your strengths by speaking to other people, learning and developing on it.
Now, mate, that's amazing. And thank you so much for your insights into your role in the club and the developments of the club at the moment, which have obviously been fantastic. And obviously, good luck. I hope you're as successful as you have been in the last few seasons there and things keep driving forward. It must be an amazing place to be. And yeah, thanks ever so much for your time, Kevin.
Brilliant, John. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully your listeners will be able to understand the accent and it's not too hard for them.
Are you talking about my Yorkshire accent now?
Well, you lost a little bit of yours. I don't think I've lost much of mine over the last 20 years.
No, look, thanks ever so much and thanks for taking the time.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So that's it for this episode of Recover, Perform, Excel. Thank you for listening. If you took something useful from today's conversation, share it with your team, your colleagues, or anyone on the rehab and performance journey. You can subscribe and find all episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and at kikkohealth.com. And if you've got a myth to bust or a method to share, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. So until next time, keep moving forward.